teman-teman semuanya, smart people, dimanapun teman-teman berada. Good evening everyone. Senang sekali bisa membuka sesi ketiga, Day 1 dari Digital Society Week yang adalah merupakan acara diseminasi riset dari CFDS UGM. Untuk sesi kita pada malam hari ini, saya akan menjadi moderator pada sesi ketiga hari ini. Perkenalkan, nama saya Hafiz Nur dari Divisi Riset Center for Digital Society UGM. Pada sesi ketiga Digital Society Week hari ini, judul yang akan kita bahas adalah The Clash of Communications, Geopoliticisation of Platforms and the Future. Jadi, from the title itself, kita bisa belajar gitu ya, bagaimana platform-platform komunikasi semakin sentral gitu untuk strategi-strategi geopolitik begitu ya, saling menginfluence, memberikan influence dari platform kepada negara, dan tidak hanya kepada negara tetapi juga kepada organisasi internasional, dan the other way around begitu, dari negara atau dari berbagai negara begitu ya, atau organisasi internasional bisa mendampakkan pada platform-platform komunikasi, kira-kira seperti itu. Nah, sebagai introduction begitu ya, pengembangan teknologi digital ini membawa banyak dampak positif gitu ya, eksternalitas positif, but at the same time dia juga bisa memberikan kita end user gitu ya tantangan yang begitu kompleks. Nah, pada akhirnya pada sesi kali ini kita akan mengundang pembicara yang tidak kalah menarik begitu ya, dan sangat insightful tentunya dalam mempresentasikan risetnya yang berjudul The Clash of Communications, Geopoliticiation of Platforms and the Future. In this discussion, I'm not alone. I will invite the speaker who will share his perspective with all of you. And our speaker tonight is Professor Jack Yu from Nanyang Technological University. Good evening, Prof. Jack Yu. Are you there?
Yes, good evening. Selamat malam.
Selamat malam, Jack Yu. So everyone, this is Jack Yu, live from Singapore. So he will be spending his evening with us all to present his research on the geopolitization of platforms and the future. Thank you, Jack, for taking the time to be with us tonight. I believe that Jack has prepared the material in an engaging way, and hopefully, and I believe as well, from this session, smart people, as we call our audience, Jack, will gain deeper insights on your research and also the way forward after this. Also, before we start, I'd like to inform you all, smart people, especially those who have joined tonight's event through YouTube. Participants can ask questions to share their opinions through the YouTube live chat. And then my colleagues from CFDS will list down all of the questions from YouTube live chat. Also, feel free to ask your questions, as many as you want, because the best questioner will be eligible to receive an e-wallet prize from CFDS. Second, participants are also entitled to an e-certificate by CFDS by filling out the attendance link that will be sent by admin via the live chat at the end of the event. So make sure you stay until the end. Certificate that is, and also please listen and engage with us all, smart people, and stay with
Sorry, I cannot hear. Can you hear me? Okay, so I should start speaking. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay, good, great. Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Hafiz, for the very kind introduction. I assume you just said I lost your audio. I want to thank Dr. Tanya and also Alisa for inviting me to join this special evening at the Digital Society Week. And thanks to our tech support, Eka, as well. And Eka, can you share my screen? Yes, okay. So my sharing tonight is based on an article that came out earlier last year. If you scan this QR code, you will be able to download the article from the journal SM+S, Social Media and Society. So the article was already published, although I continue to work on this theme about the geopoliticization of platforms. Right, so that's the keyword. Geopolitics. So it's about geopolitics on the one hand, and the digital platforms on the other. And the article published was just called 3 Approaches to the Geopoliticization of Platforms. And as this image on the left-hand side shows, my article started as a way for myself to make sense of the fallout or the consequences of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But that's just one part of my work. And next slide, Eka, please. So it's not just the Russo-Ukraine war, right? That on the top left is the article already published. On the bottom, left, you will see this is another special issue from a journal called Information Communication Society, for this journal I serve as the Asian editor for more than a decade now. And in Asia, we also talk about the geopolitics of Chinese internets, okay, in the plural, not just internet development inside China, but also in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in other continents as well. We see the consequences about U.S.-China. Initially, it was a trade war, but now it has become a tech war, okay, technology war. Right? And of course, in addition to U.S.-China, we have another war going on, Israeli-Palestine conflict, now spreading into Lebanon. Right? So as we discuss these topics as media and communication scholars, we used to have the privilege of ignoring wars. There has always been wars around the world, but in recent years, especially since the U.S.-China trade war beginning in 2018 and the Russian invasion of Ukraine since 2021, and we, as a media and communication scholars, we can no longer ignore the consequences of geopoliticization. Okay, next slide. So the key question we are going to engage with are 2. First is how to define geopoliticization. This word is a kind of mouthful, right? My article in Social Media and Society started with a reference to Nick Cernick's Platform Capitalism book. If you study digital platforms, that's usually the first English book, okay, students start to read. And that book was published in 2016, right? So 8 years later, my argument is that we need to update, okay, the original framework for platform capitalism. Another way called it is also neoliberalism. So this is a way to structure platforms for the marketplace, capitalist marketplace, right, and nothing else. This was, as I argue in this article, this is already an outdated theoretical framework. So my task in this article and tonight is mostly theoretical. It's talking about how to theorize. Okay, why does geopoliticization of digital platforms happen, and how does it? How should we theorize it, and what are the implications for scholars and students, studying media? One important caveat I want to start with is that tonight we're going to focus on the digital media, right? Because this is a Digital Society Week. We're not going to talk too much about legacy media like TV, okay, or independent media, or the content produced by state-owned or non-state actors. Rather, I would concentrate, okay, on digital platforms such as Google, TikTok, GoTo, Grab, okay? And they operate on top of the internet infrastructure, including Elon Musk's Starlink, which you will see later tonight when we talk about the geopoliticization in Ukraine and Russia. And most of these platforms are so-called unicorns. So these are very big companies, okay, they're privately owned, for-profit commercial entities, right? So they are business model centered on big data and AI, artificial intelligence, right? So that's how they are different from traditional media. And so we, doing this work from Singapore and from Southeast Asia, we also need to think about an Asian perspective, okay, that is truly global, building on earlier theoretical resources from Southeast Asian studies. So what I'm going to show here, okay, will be also drawing on our Asian resources, case studies, right, and on top of IR theories, international relations theories. So this article is an attempt to mix international relation, international politics theories with Southeast Asian studies while looking at the geopoliticization of digital platforms at a global scale. So exactly how should we do it? Let's begin with a quick video. Next slide. And Eka, please play the first video. Okay, next slide. I don't know whether you have watched this kind of video or at least heard this song before. Okay, this is a traditional folk song in Ukraine. It went viral in the early stage of the war in Ukraine. And the platform it relied on was Instagram and also Twitter accounts, okay, of a singer. This singer, his name is Andriy Klinievnuk. Okay, and then, so this is one person's video. It went viral. The video you just saw was that other musicians, some are Ukraine, some are not. Okay, some of them were even, from the old rock band Pink Floyd. Okay, they also joined, and then they make this video together. So you saw many singers together, even though this was also during the pandemic. So people cannot get physically together to sing a choir, but using platforms. Okay, if you can find it song. It's called "Hey Hey Rise Up," right? And you can find it in Spotify, in Apple Music, in different kind of music platforms. So if we go through existing literature on platform studies, okay, especially from a critical political economy perspective, okay, I'm trained more in the critical political economy tradition. And if you look at this literature, it would be clear that these platforms are much more quintessential now to the neoliberal capitalist world order than traditional digital media. I think living in Georgia or Singapore as the young people, we take this for granted almost, right? Because the premise is that these digital platforms, as we see on this slide, they constitute a global web of seamless connections, almost like a cobweb. Next slide. So here, by we say a global web, it's not just the World Wide Web. It's actually a web of many cultural, commercial, transactions. Right? This metaphor about the cobweb. Cob is the spider. Spider's web is called the cobweb. Came from 1972. International Relations classic book by John Burton. That is, the book title was World Society. In this book, he talked about rather 1972. By the way, was still in the heyday of the Cold War. The world was divided by ideology. Socialism on the one hand, we call it the Eastern Bloc. Socialist or communist on the east, and the Western Bloc, right? The capitalists, liberal, democracies, right? And but then John Burton actually thought, it's much better if we use a marketplace of ideas, to dissolve the world of the Cold War, and then think about how people are connected with each other, right? They are, so each node in this cobweb can be a country, can be a city, can be a village, can be a single person. Here in this book, actually, John Burton, he worked in Southeast Asia. He was actually making a reference to a Malaysian citizen, in the original book of 1972. Here he said, the connections among different people, can, for example, can be one person. I'm quoting him. This one person, this one Malaysian citizen, can be Chinese by birth, regard himself as a Malay nationalist, businessman, British educated and oriented, and anti-communist. Right? He must be placed in an area in which the circles representing all these sets overlap. So here you can see this is one person can have multiple economic, cultural, religious ties, ethnic ties, right? And as a Malay nationalist, he probably are connected more with places like Singapore, right? But as a businessman, he may have more connection with Indonesia, right? And he regard himself as a religious person. There are Chinese, Malay in Malaysia, of course. So the religion may strengthen his connection with the Middle East. But as ethnic Chinese, he probably also speak some Chinese dialect. So you can see there are many this kind of weak ties. So this is the essence of the cobweb and also neoliberal framework. So the world are connected by people with all kinds of weak ties, even though each tie, each link in the cobweb can be very weak, but altogether they become very strong. So the strength of the cobweb for the spider is not a single, thread; it's the whole web working together with multiple connections. Right? So this was also the dominant imaginaries for the internet. When internet started, it was organized as a decentralized. Every node is weak, but there are many redundancies, right? So the original idea of the information superhighway or a global village is very much based on this version. So all these weak ties, they're not political ties, they're not nation state ties, but then they are commercial ties and also cultural ties, right? And this was the default way to see internet from the 1990s until the mid 2010s, less than 10 years ago. Right? However, since the 2010s, we see 2010s, the last decade, was a decade defined by AI power platforms. Not just Twitter and YouTube, but also TikTok and VK. VK is the Russian social network, or Kakao Talk for Koreans, right? In Southeast Asia, we have Zalo for Vietnamese, right? Not only their commercial triumph, but also their social cost and political risk, Cambridge Analytica, okay, this type of scandals were breaking out. So as a result, at the beginning of the 2020s, right, even before the war in Ukraine, governments from Asia to America to Europe, okay, governments around the world have begun to weigh in, and also the platform designed for profit maximization, as in the cobweb, are being repurposed, okay, for geopolitical goals. Next slide. So here are three books. I'm not going to, or two books. Okay, I'm not going to go into them. But the one on the left side is actually written by computer scientists, right? And the on the right hand side is a bestseller in Singapore. Okay, in recent months about the chip war, the tech war between U.S. and China. So while reading these books, I have started to consider this notion of geopoliticization, right? By which I understand a dynamic and multi-dimensional process moving towards the opposite of the liberal or neoliberal world, the opposite based on the mental image of the cobweb, right? So the cobweb is being ripped apart. There are no longer just one internet, one cobweb, but four internets, for example, in this book, all right, on the left-hand side. So the world is not just one internet, one platform, but many different platforms, many internets in the plural, responding to the geopolitical realities on the ground. Next slide. So this is what we can call the new normal. Geopoliticization, okay, is much more than the weaponization of social media during election time. And it's much more than the clash of tech empires between, Huawei and
8:00 p.m.
Cisco, for example. Right? It is actually about the increasing coercion, okay, by state and non-state actors in the everyday operation of platform companies. So they are coerced. You have to do it, otherwise you can be jailed or you can be killed in some cases, right? And the goal of geopoliticization is to gain control over the ownership, infrastructure, and management, including algorithmic management of the digital platforms. And this control can be direct or indirect through government agencies and their non-state collaborators of various types. Together, they serve the geostrategic goals of states through such efforts as the so-called hybrid war. Right? The latest example for the hybrid war is the pager, okay, or the walkie-talkies blowing up in Lebanon. Right? And these are examples of digital media, and including older forms of communication being used as being hybridized with the firepower of a military force. And this is a process through which platforms are territorialized. So which the location, we used to say on the internet, it doesn't matter where you are. But now, after geopoliticization, which side you are? Are you with the Israelis or the Palestinians? Okay, the fault line of geopolitical boundary become fatal consequences, right? And this is where we can borrow from international relations, IR scholars, that would call, the realism school. Just now we talked about the cobweb. We need to talk about the realism, school, when platform companies are aligned with different geopolitical, geotethered forces on the ground. So the geopoliticization of platforms also include algorithmic power. Okay, where do you store your data in the cloud? Okay, who are doing the the algorithmic optimization? Okay, on the ground, and much of this algorithmic power is vastly unequal. Okay, they function like monopoly capital, right? Because it's the large scale and high speed. It's not just their big data are not big in terms of volume, but also in terms of the fast pace of processing. Right? That demands huge amount of computing power. So so long before the visible fists of government regulators punching platform companies in recent years, we see these invisible forces of geopoliticization that has been underway. But after the war in Ukraine, they went through the surface. Right? Next slide. So here are a few examples. On the right-hand side, these are the Chinese technologies, right? That some of which are smuggled, okay, to help the Russians. On the left-hand side, these are technologies, companies, all right, that are either pulling out from Russia and making things, Russian phones cannot use Google Map, right, in Ukraine. You probably know that, but also helping Ukraine forces, okay, to identify and to strike on Russian targets. And next slide. A good example here is the Chinese company ByteDance that owns TikTok for global market and also Douyin for Chinese market. Right? It's the same company. Initially, it was the same platform technology, but it evolved in different ways. Right? In the good book, okay, AI Superpowers, Kai-Fu Lee used to be the boss for Google China. Right? When he wrote this book before the war in Ukraine, he thought China and the US can learn from each other while they compete in AI technology. But since the war, on the right-hand side, this is a Douyin image. Right? This is the Chinese TikTok image where basically they're pro-Russian. Okay, they did all kinds of things, and in some cases of live streaming, the Chinese influencers were also mocked, ridiculed by Chinese young people themselves. Right, but on the right-hand side, okay, so here you have TikTok. Okay, both platforms owned by the same company, but the White House actually called the young influencers, American TikTokers, into the White House to train them, to let them, speak, influence American public opinion in favor of Ukraine, not against Russia. So you can see the two platforms were both used by the governments, okay, and the commercial users, working for those governments for completely opposite geopolitical goals. Next slide. So and next, yeah, okay, yes. So the basic idea here, okay, is of offensive realism, right? Offensive realism is just now we talk about the metaphor of cobweb, which was the world of digital technology is a world of commercial and cultural connections, but the world of realism, this is the opposite paradigm, opposite theory in international relations, is that the world is a world of billiard balls. So imagine, so if you play the billiard balls, imagine this is a coaster, okay? But imagine this is US, this is China, right? So this theory, imagine rather than cobweb, you actually have this billiard balls bumping into each other. Different nation states, they have different mass. Okay, for example, the US, their digital economy is have longer history, have more money, all right, than China. So this is Silicon Valley-led US platform billiard ball, and when they bump into China, all right, or other countries, because this one has more mass, so other countries with more mass would actually be bumped away, right? And then so this is a way of big power exercising influence, power over another power. But the Chinese were actually thinking, okay, we don't have the size of the US Silicon Valley, but we have big data and we are moving very fast. Sometimes it's not just the mass, the weight of the billiard ball, but the speed. So the Chinese company was saying, by moving faster, even though we have less capital, we have less money, but we can push US away because we are moving faster. Okay, our AI are doing more agile, and that by that way we can push US away rather than being pushed away. So this is old framework, okay, from international relations that we now apply to critical communication and media studies. Next slide. I'm going to skip this slide, okay, and next slide, please, and next. Yes, yes, okay. So here you can see in the geopoliticized world. Can you click one more, Eka? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to just fast forward. Yeah. So you see different countries and platforms. They form different alliance. Okay. They only operate in one side of the fault line of geopolitical conflicts. All right. And for example, it's now an open secret. Ukraine missile can hit Russian target precisely because they were aided by NATO military intelligence. Next slide. So now you see this is the idea of the billiard ball. Okay, so the world is moving backward. Okay, from a cobweb of commercial and cultural connections to a world of billiard ball. Okay, brute force. Okay, bumping into each other. Could there be another way? All right, next slide. Yeah, so this article proposed we can have a third perspective. In addition to the cobweb liberalism and the billiard ball realism, we can see the world in the light of ant societies. So ants, right? Ants are actually, biologists actually call it eusocial animal. So we human beings, we are social animals. Eusocial is we put an EU in front of social. Eusocial means they are genuinely more social. They're even more social than humans. Why? Number one, ants or bees, these eusocial animals, these insects, they take care of strangers' children like their own. Okay, that's one thing. Number two, ant societies, they invest a lot more. Usually human society, we invest around 30% on average of our national GDP in public infrastructure. But for ants, and they often invest 70 or 80%. The majority of their economy, if there's ant economy, are invested in the public, the hives, okay, their own public infrastructure, right? So the ant society discussed in this article is a critique for both liberalism and realism because it's actually theorizing from the bottom up, from the grassroots. Okay? And then they will include what we would call digital labor, okay, who come together, exercise their collective, power. Right? So here we need to think about not just the cobweb theory offers one perspective. The billiard boards offers a second perspective, but the ant society offers a new perspective that is not totally covered and actually can be a liberating perspective. While writing this part, I was reading some biology books, and I read about one ant society is also called ant colony. The world's biggest ant colony actually spans 4 countries, from northern Italy to southern France to Spain and Portugal. Okay, the total number of all these ants together in this one colony. Okay, you can lift one ant from the Atlantic coast of Portugal and put it into the Mediterranean coast of Italy, and he will easily blend in, right? Because these ants, they see their own fellow citizens of that super colony as because they smell the same, right? And how many ants are there in this super colony? 5 billion with a B. Okay, 5 billion ons seeing each other as the same. They will take care of each other's children, for example, right? And this is 5 billion. 5 billion is the number of all the internet users in the world. So when I was writing this, I thought about, wow, if we can have all the 5 billion internet users in the world identify with each other like the ants, then we are very successful, right? So this is the very dense diagram, a table that shows how the three approaches differ from each other, right? I'm not going to spend time reading everything, but basically ant society representing constructivism, okay, a very important approach in media and communication studies that is not sufficiently popular in international relations, right? So the liberalism emphasizes the commercial elite, the rich people, while the billable realism emphasizes the political and military, okay, the big power, the powerful. But here in society, they actually theorizes people without power, without money, okay, average small potatoes, small ants can also make a difference because they have their own storytelling capacities and they have their own métis. Okay, métis is a local knowledge. Right. Next slide. So métis for this article is almost like the smell. Like I said, ants differentiate who are their own ants, who are their enemies through smell. So métis is a local knowledge that is tacit, right? It's a notion from ancient Greek philosophy, right? And métis is different from techne or technical, right? Technical things can be codifiable and also measurable, but métis, okay, is almost like navigation and medicine. This is traditional medicine, right? And activities where practical wisdom of long experience is indispensable to superior performance, right? So you have to always try, okay, responsive, improvise. There's no fixed formula, and you have to do that again and again, and every time it's slightly different. Okay, it's like when you navigate uncharted water. How can you avoid the hidden hazard? Next slide. So there's a story here, again from Southeast Asia Studies by the author James C. Scott. Right? He was doing field work in rural Malaysia, and he lived in a house. This house in rural Malaysia, the household, it was headed by Uncle Matisa, right? Uncle Matisa's house has a very magnificent mango tree. Okay, this mango tree produced the best mango, in the community. So other villagers often visit him, give him different kind of gifts, a chicken, okay, or a flower in exchange to a mango, okay, from this magnificent tree, so that they can plant the seed and grow their own mango tree that generates as magnificent mango as possible, like in this tree. But no other tree can be, the mangoes are not good because there's something probably special about the soil, right? But one day, Uncle Matisa found out, right, this magnificent mango tree was invaded by red ants. So this is a bunch of ants. They're very aggressive, right? And then they invade the tree and they are eating the mango. They are killing the tree. So what could he do? In the modern technological society, probably people will take out pesticides, okay, using chemicals to kill the red ants. But to kill the red ants, probably will kill the tree because you're using poison, right? Or you will change the chemical, right? Composition of the soil. Something special about this tree because the chemical composition of the soil probably is unique. You do not want to contaminate that. So what should Uncle Maitza do? He used his métis. Next. So previous slide. I want to stay on the previous slide. Yeah, but there should be one more. Okay, yes. Now, So he brought in his backyard, these magnificent mango trees in his front yard. In his backyard, he has these small black ants that are half the size of the red ants, right? But then they're enemies with each other. So he used different skills, okay? And he used dried tree leaves, the nipa palm tree. So he used a special kind of palm tree leaves to build new homes for the black ants near the bottom of the mango tree. And then these black ants actually surrounded the tree, and then they drove out the black ants. Even though the red ants are bigger, the black ants are smaller, but there were more black ants than the red ants, so they drove the red ants away, and the black ants are not interested in the mango. So the tree was saved without using chemical poisons, right? So this was an example. During the process, Uncle Madisa had no idea. No one can guarantee him. Maybe this trick he used would work in the middle of the year, in May or June, but not November or December. So he had to try. He had to improvise with different kind of local knowledge. So this is the type of end society knowledge we are hoping to foster, to look for in the digital platform time. Okay, I'm going to fast forward. Okay, next slide. And next, yeah, these are examples from the war in Ukraine. And next slide. Yeah, I want to go to conclusion now. So besides the conventional approaches of liberalism and realism, the end society model remains vital. Okay, the constructivism model is vital because it unhinges the prevailing concerns of Eastern, okay, or the Sino-Russian bloc on the one hand, vis-a-vis the West, US-led, okay, Ukraine, West Africa, for example. And if we continue with the old model of the billiard ball, okay, or the cobweb, okay, now being ripped apart by the forces East and West, then it's very hard to find a place to have connections between the two, okay, and also it will be very hard to avoid the war escalating, right? And so this end society constructivist realism approach is an approach that hopefully will help us to envision peace, right? So with this, I submit that a better approach than traditional realism and constructivism, and realism and liberalism is this kind of constructive liberalism within and between the platforms, okay, now conceived as end society that interrelate with each other and evolve on the basis of abstractable knowledge at the macro, global, and regional level. So within Southeast Asia, we can have multiple layers of Métis formation, right? And so that AI-powered platforms can be repurposed, okay, to foster peace, to help the workers on the ground, worker ants, we can sometimes call them, on the ground, and the soldier ants online, okay, as can be seen, okay, in the song that I want to play again. The second video, please.
Лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну розвеселимо. Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чого ж наша славна Україна зажурилася, а ми тую червону калину підіймемо, а ми нашу славну Україну розвеселимо. Ой, у лузі
So with this, I'd like to salute all the working people, all the working ants who collaborate creatively and resiliently in their struggle to defend our common humanity against the imperialism of all kinds, right? To safeguard our civility using digital platforms among other means of struggle against the domination on either side of the horrible disaster of the ongoing war, be it in Russia, Ukraine, or in the Middle East. Right? When I play this song, actually, I gave an earlier version of this talk a year ago, and my host actually invited a professor from St. Petersburg, the journalism school of St. Petersburg University. And she actually was moved to tears when I played this song, right? Even though she's on a different side, okay? While listening to this song, even though Russians, identify with, because the melody, okay, is the emotions, okay, for dignity, for humanity, can identify across, many boundaries. So this is my way to think about can internet users identify with each other across geopolitical fault lines like ants, using their smelt. So in this case, the melody, okay, is functioning almost like the primordial, the scent, the smell of the ants, okay, to transcend geopolitical fault lines. Thank you. I will stop here. Hafiz, you are muted. I cannot hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, works
Okay.
now.
Thank you for the great presentation by Jack. I myself is engaged by the way Jack presents himself, but also the subject of his research. I think if I can summarize up, platform geopoliticization is a process by which digital platforms are subjected to the coercive sway of geopolitical forces, both as byproducts of great power rivalry and as instruments of informational warfare during confrontations among institutional as well as grassroots actors. I think what needs to be highlighted is the way we can approach this phenomenon into three categorization. First is through liberalism, second is through realism, and third is through constructivism, by which the paradigm varies the paradigm varies between the role of the state, the platform companies, where the individual situates in the three approaches and in front of the phenomenon, meaning geographical aspects as well, means of control, resources, and also knowledge. I think I myself is not alone to engage in this case. I think the wider audience also have, interest in your presentation, and I think I will be open to questions coming from the live chat.
Yes, I can see the first question about cyber war, right?
Yes, cyber warfare that stem from geopolitical communication clashes. If you want to answer that directly, Jack.
Sure. Yes. Okay. So first, cyber war has already been going on, okay, including in Asia Pacific. Okay. Singapore, okay, was a victim some years ago. You probably know, like there were hackers hacking into medical system, okay, in Singapore, okay, trying to steal. They actually succeeded in stealing some of the very private, okay, medical records of high officials in Singapore, right? So for cyber war, mitigation, number one is to have really good defensive mechanism, right? So that not just for the big power, right, but also for average citizens. So it's a responsibility for all countries, for all nation states. Once we build up digital infrastructure, there has to be effective ways to safeguard our privacy, right? And but these days, usually the highly effective defensive mechanisms come with a big price tag. Right? Only rich, Singapore is often seen as a rich country, but even Singapore, we don't have enough. Okay, so it's not just a matter of money, but also literacy training, right? Media literacy, information literacy, so that all the citizens will not fall for it. So there's for cyber war prevention, we need to have good information literacy education, right, for the general population, and also the somehow the companies, okay, or the forces, somehow some of these hackers are individual hackers, teenage hobbyists, right? But then there are armies of hackers, okay, for example, trained in North Korea, right? And so there must be international efforts to bring consequences to the offenders, right? Who defend who hack into other countries, okay, or disrupt, okay, financial system, right? Electricity or public transportation systems, right? So there must be more serious consequences that are enforceable, so that the rock players, okay, the offenders, we often call them the rock players, have to bear consequences, cost them more than what they can gain, okay, from these cyber attacks. Yeah, those are my, and this is not just efforts, okay, from the end. So if we use the liberalism cobweb perspective, then this is just about getting more money, spend more money on security. If we use the realism billiard boards, then this means we need to get more military. Maybe UN should have a peacekeeper force, all right, that can carry guns and go into North Korea to arrest, okay, the hackers, okay, in North Korea, which is unlikely to happen anytime soon. But with the constructivist, okay, and society perspective, this means we can have a discourse to tell the stories about these hackers, and then we tell this in the language of in North Korean dialects as well, so that they will feel so shamed, right? So there, this is through storytelling, through music, okay, through not through money and military force, okay, but through cultural persuasion and storytelling, okay, so that they will have to stop, right? So these are, you can see the three different approaches actually can give different answers to your excellent question. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jack, for your response. I think from the second question that I picked from the live chat here, if I can translate to you,
Please.
How do countries around the world distinguish between legitimate regulations to protect national security and when they become excessive controls that can limit freedom of information, freedom of speech, etc.?
Yes, this probably is a little bit beyond this paper. All right, in legal scholarship, there are many discussion about freedom of speech. Okay, and also legitimate regulation. Okay, so from the regulator's perspective, okay, online speech is almost like traffic. Without traffic regulation, there will always be a traffic jam. Okay, you cannot get anywhere because there's no rule that applies, right? So, but what exactly is regulation? What exactly is censorship, right? So censorship is illegitimate, okay, regulation. This actually has a historical context, right? For example, U.S. is the country usually in Asia we think, oh, have the freedom of speech, but U.S. actually throughout history have multiple legislations, laws to say, for example, in slave-owning states of the South, okay, in Louisiana, Georgia, for example, there used to be laws to forbid African Americans to own drums. Okay, drums. All right, you cannot own a drum if you are African American, because the slave owners were afraid the drums can transmit among the slaves that they don't understand. Right, so it used to be illegal. Right, for 100 years ago in the U.S., you cannot tell other people how to do birth control, right? If you write another letter to a person, you can be thrown in jail. That law is called Comstock law. So at certain period of time in the U.S., there were, today we will see, okay, this would be freedom of speech. But as for example, before September 11, 2001, the fine line between regulation and censorship actually shifted, because before September 11, you could talk about anything. You can teach people how to make a bomb, right? But after 2001, you cannot. So you can see the boundary between regulation and the censorship, legitimate and illegitimate, regulation actually can evolve over time. So what is proper? Usually we say this is community centered. In Singapore, we have our community, consensus about what is acceptable, what is not acceptable speech. I think in Indonesia, you have your own standard. Maybe even in different, different parts of Indonesia, there will be different standards, right? And the same thing would apply to online communities. So it's not just offline, but for people in different platforms. Something is acceptable on Instagram, but it's not acceptable on Facebook. Okay, this is also possible.
Yeah. I see. Okay. A third question. I think this is an interesting question. How should international organizations and policymakers respond to the growing influence of global tech platforms in shaping global narratives and geopolitical dynamics?
Yeah, on the one hand, I think until 2 or 3 years ago, right? So if we talk about the rise of AI-powered digital platforms, that has been more than a decade, right? But then it's only in the last 3 years or so, okay, international organizations are taking. By this I mean UN, different kind of UN, agencies, UNESCO included, right? They are more proactive now, right? At least they have a on paper statements about how platforms should have their responsibility. But until recently, they don't even have anything on paper, right? But now the UN agencies are having this on paper thing, but whether they can enforce it is a completely different question, right? But at least they have something on paper now, right? And ITU, okay, International Telecommunication Union, also become more assertive, okay, and but more than the UN, I think the international organization that has the most sway against the platforms, okay, is European Union. Okay, European Union has already had multiple AI acts. Okay, for example, the most basic framework is to differentiate AI. Some are platform AI, some are military AI. Some platforms are medical AI, right? And so they use a risk-based approach. So that's actually, I think, have more traction, right? So the social media platforms we just mentioned, Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, these are low-risk platforms. But there are higher risk medical AI platforms, right? So there are platforms using cloud computing that have all the medical data coming together, and then they train algorithm. Okay, actually in Singapore, my colleagues just did a study about doctors and AI, right? Especially for lots of today's AI is very good at pattern matching, whether you got cancer or not. So once the AI have studied 1 million cases, okay, they can be the margin of error can be less than an experienced doctor. So in Singapore, we find out the more experienced doctors are actually more receptive. They like to use AI tools. But the younger, okay, doctors who are less experienced, they don't have enough confidence, and they worry AI will take away their jobs. Okay, they are more resistant. But this, you can see the medical AI and platforms and everyday social media, because medical, we're talking about people's lives. All right. So there are different approaches. We need to look at different international organizations. Okay, like medical AI also has their own international. I think WHO, yes, is also developing standards for medical AI. But one thing I really hope to see more when we talk about international organizations is ASEAN. Okay, ASEAN should do more from a Southeast Asian perspective, right? That's something hopefully future smart people from UGM can lead a task force in ASEAN, and in Singapore we would love to join.
Hopefully. Hopefully. Okay, there are few questions left. I think two questions left. The second last question is, even though people can use platform to raise awareness, it lack capability to pressure government to end wars. In your opinion, what else can we, as the people, can do to pressure government to end the war? I know sounds a bit, I don't know, cliche or naive, but what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, governments do wars, but so do other people. Sometimes the governments are also pressed by their nationalists, right, to engage in this warfare. So the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for example, started with a lot of storytelling to say Ukraine is not an independent nation; it's part of Russia, and all the Ukrainians love Russians and they hate Zelensky. Right, that's the story Putin was fed with. Right, so the governments and constructivism. Indeed, when you ask this question, this is a very good fundamental question, right? And but the assumption is that government only work in a realistic world of the billiard boards. All right, but government actually also works in the environment, right, of storytelling. Right, the U.S. and China, the predominant story in these two countries used to be more than 10 years ago that the two are excellent allies. They are friends with each other. That was a different constructivism. So I think as small ends we can do is especially if we are college students, especially if we study media and communication, we need to improve our storytelling skills, okay, to tell the story of peace, right, to expose, okay, the underbellies, the dark side, the hidden lies, okay, of realism, and also I would say of liberalism as well. All right, so those are the elite lies, right, to keep the world unequal, okay, the rich and the powerful, okay. The liberalism is helping the rich. Realism is helping the powerful. Both of them work together to keep the small potatoes, to keep the small ants in marginalized position. Okay, so that our voices become silent. So very important. as media and communication majors is that we practice our voices, okay, so that we keep telling the story. We give voice to the voiceless, right? And then we practice, I would call it a radical egalitarianism, like we learn from the ants, right? So that we treat each other as equals, right? And we build an online community for public welfare, not for individual, personal interest. No matter that is a powerful, rich businessman or a powerful politician, right? So we need to have a common interest. We sometimes call it the digital commons, right, among the small ants, so that we are cautious when we rely on Silicon Valley, okay, or Chinese AI, right? We have to keep our own autonomy and our own egalitarianism in the online community world while we practice storytelling, and then wait a final skill, okay, to answer to your. This is I have to. This is probably a $1 billion question, right? The hardest part is once we have our community, we have our collective storytelling, we have our mates, we have to wait for the timing, right? At a critical timing. So if you know a little bit, one of the most important success story against gangsters can be more pernicious than states, right? And the worst gangster, most notorious gangsters in one of them is the KKK, okay, the racist Ku Klux Klan. The KKK was actually brought down by stories. Okay, someone went in. I see Harris is nodding. He probably knows the story. Okay, someone went into to study how they communicate, and then he used the code and put the secret code of the racist Ku Klux Klan, okay, the KKK, into a children's radio broadcast. Right, this was a story in the 1950s, right? So radio was the most popular new media of the time. So if we can crack the codes for the nationalists, okay, for the military, the warmongers, and then we can replicate in the online, so they lost their communication power. Then usually we have to wait for that moment, okay, when there's also internal conflict within the powerful and the rich, okay, elite circle. Then storytelling can work magics.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. I think we have come to the end of our session, Jack, and also other smart people. But I'd like to thank Professor Jack Q for such an enlightening discussion this evening, and also thank you for spending the time with us today to enlighten us, to share your research outputs to us. And thank you also to audience smart people who asked questions today. Very bright questions, I believe, from Jack too. Apologize to all smart people if we couldn't answer all the questions due to time constraints. It's already 9 p.m., almost 9 p.m. in Singapore. Uh, and I greatly appreciate your enthusiasm once again. I hope this discussion has given us all a deeper understanding of today's topic regarding geopoliticization of platform in the global world. Thank you for your participation and enthusiasm once again. And as a wrap up to this discussion, I'd like to add several important information for smart people. Regarding the certificates, the link to get the e-certificate can be found at ugm.id/certif day 1 sessi 3. I think my colleague will share the link below on the chat box. Also, the link to claim this e-certificate will only be available for the next 2 hours. So, untuk 2 jam ke depan, smart people can fill out the information as soon as possible once we close the session. Also, I want to remind smart people to stay up to date on our Digital Society Week schedule by visiting the website, checking our social media posts regarding uh, uh, the next sessions of Digital Society Week. I think we have come to the conclusion that our best question in this session is Dwiandi Waskito from Department of Communication at UGM. So congratulations. So Dwiandi is the one who asked about how should international organizations and policymakers respond to the growing influence of global tech platforms in shaping uh, global narratives and geopolitical dynamics. So congratulations, Wiandi. And for further information, please contact our social media so that our admin can answer and help you with the prompts. And also for Dwiandi, can also ask us how to claim your prize. I think that is all to conclude our session, Jack. Is there anything that you want to share from you as a
Yes.
closing remark?
Thank you, Hafiz. Tanya, gave me the permission to do one last commercial. Okay,
Oh,
commercial advertisement is I'm in the Week in Week School of Communication and Information. Okay, at NTU Singapore, and we're going to host IAMCR next year. IAMCR stands for International Association for Media and Communication Research. This is one of the world's largest professional association for students and scholars studying media and communication. So my school will be hosting next year's IMCR in Singapore from 13th to 17th July next year. The theme next year will be communicating environmental justice. Many voices, one health. Okay, one health means not just healthy people, smart people, okay, but also healthy planet, healthy forest, healthy ants, okay. So the everything coming together as the inclusive framework. So if you are interested, please go to IMCR website. All right, you can search. And also, when we have a formal call for paper, I will send it to Center for Digital Society. And I hope we'll have a strong submission. And also, many of you can come visit us in Singapore. Thank you.
great.
Nice.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much for the information. I believe students coming from UGM or elsewhere in Indonesia who is participating in this evening session will be glad to fly to Singapore to join the conference. So bear in mind, so if you want to see the website, please go through the conference site. I think Jack can also provide us with the detailed information through the chat, through our colleagues from CFDS. So then again, that concludes our evening session. I thank very much Jack for spending your evening with us, sharing your research outputs, and this is a very enlightening session. I am engaged, and I believe other smart people engaged. This is a very food for thought for our dinner, I guess. And yeah, thank you for your participation, smart people. And I look forward to seeing you all on the next sessions of Digital Society Week. Thanks very much, Jack.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Jack. Terima kasih, smart people.
Good night, smart
Good
people.
night. Malam.